one of the problems with that is in a lot of areas in life where we should feel pain, we actually stop ourselves from feeling pain. So again, I think a big problem with society and humans and governments is that we don't allow ourselves to go through the pain. Like we do something wrong, the pain comes, and then we just, I don't know, brush it under the rug or inflate the money supply, whatever it is. It's like, no, we did something wrong. We should be feeling this pain because this is a consequence of it. This is where the whole concept of having skin in the game is very important. It's like you have skin in the game because if you do something wrong, you're going to feel the pain of that. And that's going to tell you, oh, hang on, I shouldn't go that way. I shouldn't do that. And so that's why, yeah, I think the way it humbles us, I think that's one thing. Like you said, you can ignore other things, but if you feel pain, you can't ignore that. It's going to tell you, hang on, don't do this. That's wrong. It's going to tell you that you're not as tough as you think you are.
Yeah, and I think you're right about we try to shield ourselves from pain at points in which we shouldn't. So if you go back, it was too big to fail. It wasn't really too big to fail. It was too painful to fail. That's really what the scenario is. I'm referring to the GFC that happened in 2008. And so we never really recovered from that in my mind. I think there's still although COVID has caused impacts to the financial crisis, I also think our perspective about what finance changed at that point in time in my mind in history, when it was perceived that a company could be big enough that it wasn't allowed to fail. And so, yeah, that was kind of like the pain in which the government and society had to go through was too great, and they weren't willing to confront that. And if you're unable to confront that, it's gonna. The funny thing in my mind about the natural world and reality is you can't avoid it. It doesn't matter how you think about it or what your perspective is about it. The natural state or the physical state is always going to maintain what we consider natural physical laws. And so in that instance, I think we just went against the natural or physical law that we should have gone through. Yeah, they did something wrong and they should have gone through the pain of that. And it would have been a knock-on effect for others, but it would have addressed that issue at that point.
Yeah, reality always reveals itself. You know, you can try and hide it, obscure it as much as you want, but it'll always get you in the end. I'm picturing like a horde of zombies that's like slowly chasing you. It's like you can run as far and as fast as you want, but eventually it will catch up to you. Like it's unrelenting. It's just, it's unfeeling. It's unmoving. It's just following you. And you can either deal with that or you can keep running, but you're always going to be struggling if you keep running.
Exactly. And I guess there are strategies to figure out a good timing for that to occur. So, you know, I'm going to use your zombie analogy because I like zombies. But I think in that case, yeah, you're right. So like if the zombie was always chasing you, there's a period of time at which you can buy a bit of space for yourself and then think. But at that point in time, what you really want to be thinking is how do I confront and overcome this, not how do I actually get rid of it altogether. Because if you think that you've got rid of it altogether, the reality is it's just you're not observing it. That's the difference. You've just trained yourself not to observe or monitor that situation. And that is, in my mind, a greater risk than you actually then confronting it. But then at certain points, you want to probably confront it at the right point in time. So, I mean, that's what boxers and fighters do. You know, any good or sport in general, any good sport is actually figuring out the timing of when you're actually, okay, I'm in the good moment now and I'm in a bad moment now, and understanding that and taking advantage and figuring out a strategy of defense or attack or whatever it would be in those scenarios.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it is fair enough at times to give yourself that room, but eventually you're always better off at least confronting it at some point at infrequent enough intervals. It's not, you can't put out absolute values on it, but yes, generally it's better to be more confronting than it is to be running away or obscuring. The too big to fail that you mentioned before, I really hate that idea. It's akin to putting all your eggs in one basket. Like that used to be a bad thing, but now apparently it's what we want. The other thing is any time we design something, any good engineer is not looking at, okay, if one thing fails, the whole system collapses. It's, okay, how do I make this as fault tolerant as possible? How do I make this so 1,000 things can go wrong and yet it still continues to work? And again, yet some of the most important things in our life in society is set up so that, okay, if one single point of failure, the whole system collapses.
Exactly. Now, if I go back to I'm going to go back to a childhood analogy because of I think it is a situation where it could be perceived in the same manner, in that fact that, the idea that too big to fail is like what it does is it removes the experience of consequence. And so if you don't go through the experience of consequence, then you're in my mind, you're in a poorer state to deal with the future. And so I remember as a kid, quite a few times my mum sort of saying to me, if you want to do that, that's fine. But if you get caught, you take the consequence, you wear the consequence of that. And so that always stuck in my mind because that allowed me to understand that, yeah, she sort of understood that at certain points in time, you're going to do the wrong thing, or you're going to be put in a situation that that you don't like. But the only way to ever get ahead of that is to actually cop the consequence of your action. And in that case, they didn't. We didn't really cop the consequence. So the behaviour of the financial institutes at that point in time was out of step. And when there was a period where the consequence was going to happen, the consequence was removed. And so therefore there was no learning. Consequence is really, failure is important to learn and consequence is good to learn. And if you don't go through it, you miss the learning that you should have had. And in my mind, that's kind of what happened there. And I do wonder in a lot of ways, the way in which we consume and the way in which we are happy to consume at significant debt levels is because of that. We never dealt with that consequence. And maybe if we did and people lose their home or whatever, as sad as it would have been, it might have actually brought people back to going, okay, I shouldn't just have discretionary spending debt, like I'll buy a new TV and I'll just put it on debt, or I'll buy this. It would have kept people in a bit more of a check again. But I think what we saw as a result of that is people I would love to see this financially, but in my mind, people just consumed even maybe at a more rapid rate than prior to that event.
Yeah, man, that's a great attitude to have. Your mother is very wise. Consequences are very important. And again, it comes back to that balance equation that I was saying before. It's like, okay, you want to stay in this comfortable zone. The longer you stay in that zone, the more intense it's going to be afterwards in the painful zone. So yeah, I definitely think we should be facing the consequences, because like, it's reality. It's going to happen eventually. Like, you can try and put it off as long as you want, but you're only passing the buck down the road. You're only passing that off to your future self or your kids, their kids. So,